Hi everyone, welcome to this Behind the Hype session. My name's Ryan, and today we're talking about blockchain, a fintech perspective. So Behind the Hype is a series of meetups that we do around the world where we tackle overhyped topics in finance, fintech and technology. So I'm very happy today to be joined by my colleague Binish, who will join us a bit later. Just to run through some quick things. So first of all, I appreciate that some people may not be familiar with Finastra or our approach to innovation. So I'm going to quickly cover that before we jump into the blockchain side of things. So as I said, my name's Ryan. I'm Developer Relations Lead at Finastra. And Finastra are a financial technology company who operates across the world. We have a heritage of around 40 years. We have lots of offices around the world. We have a large client base that reaches about 130 different countries. We support 90 of the world's top 100 banks, and we have about 8,500 clients across the globe. And the split of our clients looks like this on the screen. So all the way from Americas, Europe, into APAC as well. So open banking is a big thing that people are talking about across the world. And at Finastra, we're very big on open finance, which is where kind of the world is transitioning of starting from open banking and then expanding it to open finance. And this really links to our approach to open innovation, and that's our platform, fusionfabric.cloud. So I'm just going to take a moment to talk through that in case anyone's interested before we jump into the blockchain side. So if I look at Finastra and what we do, our core business, our software to do with retail banking, corporate banking, lending and payments, and treasury and capital markets. And we've been on a mission over the last couple of years to open up our core systems via APIs to the ecosystem. And that ecosystem looks like this at the top. So it can be a fintech, it can be our own developers at Finastra, it can be banks, system integrators, ISVs, it could be anyone, essentially, who wants to access these core systems. And the reason why we're doing this is because we acknowledge that for us to serve the best innovations to our clients, banks, it's not all going to come from us. By opening up our platform, we're able to actually create more innovations to serve our clients. So the way it works is we've got two main parts of fusionfabric.cloud. We've got the developer portal side, which is where you access our APIs and explore and build. And then you've got Fusion Store, which is our marketplace, where once you've built an app, it goes into the store, and that's how our clients can actually consume your application. So the whole point of this is you get more data, which helps you to build more experiences and insights and new innovations. So we launched the platform live in May 2019, and since then we've had over a year of building up our capabilities. So we have over 100 APIs. We've connected about 19 of our core products to this platform, and we're also adding in new enablers like data sets and service provider interfaces, SPIs. And we've seen great adoption in the market. So we have 20 apps live, and here are actually some of the logos of those apps. And we've got a pipeline coming soon of many other apps, which is great. So the reason why I want to talk about this is because this is how we're opening up our platform, essentially, to allow us to collaborate with other partners. I'm going to bring it to life with a couple examples. So we've got Active AI, which is a fintech headquartered in Singapore who does conversational chatbots. And what they've done is they've integrated with both our retail and corporate banking APIs. So they can read and write data, they can get a hold of transaction data, payment data, and they can create chatbots using the software that serve both our retail and corporate markets. And that's both in the US and across Europe as well. So it's quite nice that you can have a fintech who's able to reach markets that they're not necessarily headquarters in. You've also got Net Guardians, which is a fintech based in Switzerland who does AI fraud detection. And they've integrated with our two core products, which are our payments product and our cash management product, through a service provider interface, so an SPI. And essentially what that does is our system calls Net Guardians to use their service, which is that fraud detection on payments to help obviously reduce fraud for corporate payments. And my last example is a new one actually called Vector Risk. And they provide a complete trading portfolio solution. And they actually leveraged one of our new capabilities called a data set. And what that is a way for us to share a bulk load of data from a financial institution with a fintech. And that's a big deal because to train AI models and to do calculations, you need a lot of data. And an API sometimes isn't the best thing for that. So you need to be able to get hold of a large data set to train your models. And we do that using Azure's data blob. So that's a quick run through of some of the bringing it to life of what we can build on the platform. If you are interested in finding out more, I recommend going to developer.fusionfabric.cloud. Have a quick look at what we've got in terms of APIs, SPIs, and data sets. And your journey starts there pretty much. So it's quite easy to get started. All our documentation is open. If you do need any support, then we have a community forum. We have product experts on hand. And then once you've built something, you go through our validation process. So any of the apps that are built on our platform, before we go and serve them out to our 8,500 customers, we want to make sure that they're secure. So we partner with a third party who helps to validate those apps before it goes into our marketplace. And if you want to have a quick look at our marketplace, then you can go to store.fusionfabric.cloud. Anyway, that was just my quick run through of Finastra and our approach to innovation. So I'm now going to pass over to Binish to actually talk about blockchain and have a bit of a behind the hype session on that. So, hey Binish, thank you for joining.
Hey, thank you, Ryan. So, welcome all to this behind the hype session on blockchain. We've been, like Ryan was saying, we're chasing innovation. We joined hands with Prathidhwani, who has been doing a lot of tech evangelization in Trivandrum and across Kerala. So we got this opportunity to go ahead work with Prathidhwani and our innovation, external innovation, reaching out to the developer community, the student community, and fintechs in dealing and talking about the latest in tech. So welcome you all once again on behalf of Finastra and Prathidhwani to go ahead and see what exactly we want to work here today on the blockchain. So we discussed about the hype around blockchain. We heard a lot about it in the news and in probably the sessions that we heard in any tech forum, be it the job sites, the highly paid jobs, or the biggest investment goes into blockchain. So what is the actual hype all about? What is the technology behind the hype? What does it hold? And then what is the impact and what do we look as the future? Now it's a mixed story. It's not just a switch on and then you get it all with blockchain. It has evolved over the period. So what we intend to cover in this session is from where it started with the peer-to-peer and where it right now looks at the blockchain part. What has the uh, the smart contract and the DApp part, what has it done in the propagation of blockchain, and what projects are of interest in the fintech world, and what is the future? So, blockchain is nothing but the removal of intermediaries. So, when I say it is a removal of intermediaries, how can we relate it into the financial world? Let me start with a question or a small activity. You could take a small or a four digit number. Let's take a small digit, four-digit number. Type it in the comment section that you see on the screen. So you can go ahead or keep a track. Write down a number, a four-digit number. Ryan, do we get that as a chat or
Yep. So
an update?
just so everyone knows, you can ask questions and interact in this session in the comments box that's just below on YouTube Live. There's a slight delay coming through to us, but it shouldn't be too bad.
Sure. So what we're trying to explain here is a number. If we have that as a starting balance, I think I'm starting to see some messages coming in, comments coming in. Yeah. So keep a track of this four-digit number. Now, I think we have more than 50 people right now participating in this. Now, keeping that in mind, what we are trying to attempt here to understand or explain what and how a blockchain works. Now, what is the actual need? What exactly triggered this growth of blockchain over the small period of time? So the driving factors is a need of a trusted third party. Now, where did it all evolve? When we needed to transact with another person, specifically when it is a known entity, as an unknown entity, when you need to do a trade, you need to go ahead and transact money to a person who you do not know personally. So that is where banks steps in, or a financial institution steps in, and then gives that trust between the parties where they take care of all the transaction. Over the period, we needed, or the business system, they wanted more transparency, security, and immutability for the transaction that were made. So people were looking into cross-border transfers, people were doing domestic transfers, people are looking for faster transfer. Now in India we have this UPI. You can imagine the kind of transformation just the mobile payments have made into the life of each one of us. So in that line, there was always a quest to increase the efficiency, the high availability of such um, financial transaction systems with lesser cost and a customer centric approach, wherein it is the data or the transaction which ideally, or the personal information of the person who is transacting, is kept at a higher priority. Now, what was the challenge? What was it that was holding back uh, the updation or the adoption of such a technology? We had the revolution happening, the computer revolution happening, say 30 years back, but something like autonomous algorithm which faced a problem which is known as, very well known as, the handshake challenge, which was acting as an impediment. The handshake challenge is nothing but the Byzantine emperor, the Byzantine problem. This is known as the Byzantine problem, wherein a three-way handshake, it gets into a infinite loop, and then no one can commit to a final or a finite decision as to whether the transaction is done or not. So this challenge was something that got resolved in the span of years, where you see the emerging uh, blockchain uh, from say 1.0 to where we talk about 4.0 right now. We have the computer, which I lead the evolution of computer starting from the 70s. From 2010, we have the blockchain coming into picture. Now, what has driven the breakthrough which brought blockchain, Bitcoin blockchain, into the forefront and running the show, which ideally is the interest that we all probably have today in sitting and listening to this. So if you see on the screen, we have the so-called the Bitcoin millionaires. So they made their money, and from where did this money come? What did a cryptocurrency have to do with an existing economy where people were willing to invest and make money out of blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain? So let's see how it evolved, wherein the blockchain 1.0 is nothing but the distributed ledger technology, which works on a P2P, peer-to-peer model. The way that it works is completely based on the proof of work concept, where money or tokens are generated by mining. A blockchain, it was invented by an anonymous group or a person, goes by the name Satoshi Nakamoto. So those impact that it created was, there was no cross border restrictions. Anyone who was part of this public blockchain was able to transact money, digital money, which got credited to the other person, and the entire transaction was transparent on a public ledger. So that is the 1.0. when when things evolved over a period, wherein in somewhere in 2013 uh, to the 15 period, we have seen the rise of Ethereum Ethereum, which ideally brought in, or which is known as 2.0, which brought in the concept of smart contracts. Now, smart contracts on top of a blockchain, it gives the user the option to program on a blockchain which can make decisions and make a transaction. So this ideally got extrapolated into various use cases, which we will see down the lane. Now, adding on to the next generation came the DApp, which ideally is a distributed application which has brought in a UI layer on top of the blockchain, which can interact directly with the end user. So, examples of that are the ETH swamps, the Coronado, and then the iota and the nano. So these talks about distributed application, and the 4.0, which ideally is intending to resolve the challenges that is faced by 1.0 and 2.0, which ideally is the blockchain, which is the Bitcoin blockchain, which has become very heavy right now. It takes a lot of time to go ahead and uh, complete a transaction compared to what it used to be 10 years back. So 4.0 is a complete disruption to the way that even the generation 1 blockchain has evolved. Now, what exactly is the digital ledger or the distributed ledger? Now, we call it as a digital freedom. Digital freedom is the case you are free to do anything, your algorithm or your process takes care of the security. There will not be a third party who is looking and then trying to correct what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. The peer-to-peer networking, we know that probably we have used over the past years, we might have used seeding to go ahead and transfer data or download files. So the same concept of uh, a decentralized set of systems handling your uh, transaction or data is what we achieved on the technology side, which made it work. So on the screen right now is how a transaction is originated, how a person requesting a transaction who is a part of a blockchain requests for a transaction, it gets pushed into um, the network, the public network, where a transaction is evaluated by all the participants of that particular net or that particular network. Now, there are different variations to how we can validate it, but the gist of it is once the validation is valid or validated, that's when that gets registered into the blockchain. So when all of those consciences, when that transaction has the 51% or more kind of a consensus, there are different consensus algorithm how we can go ahead and say that this is a valid transaction. So that ideally can be put or added to the open ledger and to a block will only when it has the relevant checks done. So here again, one when you have the transaction, all of them agreeing to it or having enough consensus on the transaction being right, only then it gets added. Now it is getting added with an encryption of SHA-256, which means every time a block is written to decrypt or rewrite, that becomes a huge hassle or a task in itself. And blockchain automatically generates ensuing task. So when you have a transaction written, it has a reference to the previous transaction as well. So when you need to decrypt and rewrite, the entire blocks or the entire previous references also need to be rewritten, which makes it potentially a challenge or a condition where you cannot even rewrite a transaction with the compute power that we have. That has been challenged with the advent of quantum computers, which we can discuss later in the challenges section. But what has happened is the current uh, blocks, the way that it is written, it is completely impossible to rewrite within the span that you get once a transaction is committed. Hence, we say that a transaction written into the blockchain is immutable. Now, this will have a lot more impact rather than just doing a transaction. this has an option of becoming a system of record, a finite record system of records, which can be used in various fields, which we can see later, like land records or government records or even constitutions. So the basic working, to recollect or recap till how we came from a peer-to-peer distributed network, all interconnected systems. There is a transaction which is made when all the relevant parties agree to that. That gets recorded onto the ledger, the public ledger. It is then shared between all the reason why we say it is public. A copy of the ledger is given to all the nodes, all the participating nodes. Hence it maintains transparency. Just to make it clear, at the start of our discussion we said to write, let's write a 4-digit number. So if someone can now write a random number and then publish it, can we have that coming in as comments? So if you write your transactions and then uh, post it in a public ledger, which ideally is your list of, uh, say, if I relate the initial number that you have added as your opening balance of an account, and the numbers that you're writing right now, the random number which is written as your transaction that you are intending to send to someone. Now, if your number, the second number that you have written, right now we have got all those streamed and it is visible to everyone. All the numbers that have come in is visible to all the people who are looking at the comment section. So now when you write the second number, which ideally could be more or less than the original balance, the 4-digit number that you have written. Now, if you're making this as your transaction, the second number that you have written, and if I say that this is the amount that you're about to transfer, and I am the only person looking at this transaction amount, when I say that it is committed, it goes to the other party. That becomes a valid transaction. Whereas in blockchain, like in your comment section, all your balances are seen by all the other people. All your references of your transaction, if you do not have $10 in your hand or 10,000 rupees in your hand, and you say that you are about to transfer 1 lakh or 100,000, which means the people looking at your chat section right now can call out. They can deny that transaction from going ahead. In short, this is the exact analogy of what a blockchain does, making your transaction visible, and people who are looking at the system, they go ahead and call out when there is a wrong transaction. One point here was the uh, smart contract, which is a part of um blockchain 2.0. So what it does is it adds a layer, an additional layer of uh, smart contracts. Smart contract is nothing but a if else statement. The way that any program, the basic of any programming language is your if else statement. So what it does is, if you have a set of conditions that need to be true before a transaction happen, you write a transaction smart contract based on which it gets executed. Now, what is in it for me as a developer, as a user, as a business? What does blockchain have in store for me? So here, the impact areas. So that's where we say that this is something that I can relate to. Now, on from a general perspective, the first use case and the most compelling one that has ideally made blockchain the star of the show is the cryptocurrency. The kind of valuation that investors or the economic um the demand which drive any commodity, which happened in the case of crypto as well. People had seen value in investing in cryptocurrency, which ideally is your replacement for fiat currency, or a replacement for your online transaction. It is a pure digital currency wherein there is a lot of entitlement that can be attached to a cryptocurrency. Now, it can the blockchain has been we mentioned earlier that uh, the value that or a blockchain brings in is not just being uh, a crypto or a cryptocurrency based system. It adds more value when it comes to a larger segment, which ideally is being a value registry. It tracks all your digital assets. It maintains the track from the origin till the end for any transaction that you do. It brings about a value ecosystem and a value web. And when we say what is uh, the value ecosystem that we're talking about, a value ecosystem is something in an Ethereum world or a public blockchain world. You get to add value to a transaction by adding smart contracts. So that gives a lot of use cases, wherein licensing, for instance, licensing is, if you have purchased so many, then you are entitled to use it. So that kind of a if else case can be handled easily with Ethereum part. Then we're talking about decentralized approach or a private uh, or a permission blockchain, which ideally is a best use case is R3 Coda, which has a value addition part when it comes to bankings or banking related systems to regulate the way that your banking or the international transfers or your domestic transfers or trade finance, which is basically driven by the banks. So having that impact, the impact areas being so huge, we are right now in a confused state when to use blockchain, whether to use blockchain or not, or is really worth it, the time and effort or the money that you spend in implementing a blockchain, is it really worth it? So based on that, we also evaluated uh, what are the blockchain challenges. What exactly are the so-called challenges which any technology right now, be it the mobile, be it your OTT platform, be it apps like WhatsApp or Facebook, the kind of adoption, uh, say the graph has been very steep, which we do not see in the case of blockchain. These so-called challenges has ideally delayed the adoption and bringing blockchain to be the mainstream technology for all those impact areas that we mentioned. Now, what are the challenges that we see? The main one is that of the Bitcoin, where at the beginning it had all the benefits that we could think about, but as and when time uh, went and we added people there and added numbers there, the system became very slow. Typically, it takes 10 to 17 minutes now to make a transaction complete, which ideally is not the case when it was not adopted at a large scale that it is right now. So basically, we are throwing blockchain to solutions where you really don't need a blockchain. So basic challenge that we are facing in the adoption or the mass adoption of blockchain, we are not choosing the right frameworks which can do or serve the purpose. Wherein we can sum it up like the major challenges would be the awareness and the understanding of using the technology in the way that it really needs to be say implemented. So it also brings about a lot of a cultural or organization change, which need to be, say, education on the part, which can definitely make people understand that what technology and what framework can definitely make a solution work. So just to recollect, there was a news on Bitcoin blockchain blocks being rewritten by a quantum computer, and then there was a news on uh, the 51% attack. So, like the the consensus algorithm, which on which the basis of which is the basis of um, any blockchain. There is the POS or the POW is one of the two of the prominent algorithms that we use in either Bitcoin or in Ethereum. So there is this 51% consensus algorithm, wherein if 51% of all all your nodes agree to a transaction, that becomes a valid transaction. So that part as well was challenged. There was uh, an option where if all your 51% of your system or your nodes become rogue nodes, and they can uh, say approve a transaction, that becomes right, which ideally is not a feasible option when it comes to mainstream blockchains like um, Bitcoin or Ethereum. This was executed on a lower scale like an Ethereum Lite, but news such as this has given the normal public or the solution adapters being very skeptical in approaching a blockchain based solution. So the right education and the right knowledge of the frameworks can definitely fuel the usage and adoption of the blockchain in mainstream. So coming to the fintech use cases, where exactly fintechs intend, and what would be the high impact areas or the high value areas where we can use fintech, I mean, blockchain for normal day-to-day activities. These are few examples that we thought about and then implemented. Um, Smart contracts, I think I've already mentioned about the smart contract part. Let's see how the virtual world, in comparison to a central bank, which ideally handles your money, be it domestic or international, the way it works. Here the diagram I've highlighted a domestic transfer. The only difference in an international one will be there will be a receiving bank with a different currency, which will be the international transfer. Whereas this ideally goes through a lot of regulations to transfer your money to the receiving party in a different country. Whereas uh, uh, in the same country, it is going to be digital transfer. But again, that has to route through the central bank or the transaction bank or their backbone, which ideally is an overhead when it compares to the way that a transaction can happen in the virtual world using a blockchain, where blocks can directly send your virtual money into the other person's wallet, and immediately it gets credited. A typical transaction time would be seconds, be it international or be it domestic transfer. Now, the the other option would be that of the trade finance, an interesting use case. The trade finance, the way it works, there is a lot of documentation that happens. There's a lot of um, approvals and then timelines that need to be controlled for a transfer of goods from one country to another, and the receiving of money for that particular service that was exported or imported to the other country. So this can completely be handled without manual intervention using smart contracts and the blockchain framework, which is dedicated for such options, which ideally can be run or maintained by a fintech. So this, even though it goes through a lot of checkpoints, all those, if programmed using a DApp or a smart contract, can easily take care of all these um, contractual obligations and the transfer amounts and the exchange rates that happen. So if ruling out the cryptocurrency, if you use tokens, which ideally you can stand in for all your transactions, that is definitely a high value use case when it comes to the fintech world. Now, domestic payments, international trade finance, and capital markets. So these ideally are areas of interest where a lot of investments we have seen. We have seen Nasdaq teaming up with Citi and Visa. We have worked with Accenture, who is a Finastra partner. There is the project size, the Hyperledger, the entire framework that is built is in association with Red Ant and a consortium of a fintech world. So all the frameworks, all the blockchain frameworks, we have seen a lot of investment happening at tune of billions of dollars that got invested in the research and adoption of blockchain. Now, let's see some prototypes which we in Finastra has done. Um, we have taken an Ethereum blockchain and tried to emulate the the licensing model, the one that was mentioned by Ryan on the Fusion Fabric. So we give solutions as SaaS. We have API based billing. Now we have per head licenses. So various licensing model that Finastra follows in its spread of applications across uh, various 1,000 plus, 10,000 plus customers that we already have. Now, based on the evaluation that we did, we took a use case wherein a user logs into an app, the application server reaches out into the smart contract, which evaluates the existing licensing model, puts a log, and then publish it in the ledger. So there is this uh, uh, the application which ideally built on DApp, which evaluates the remaining licenses per login that was done. So this particular use case was given as a hackathon idea. It went into evaluation of a 90-day project. So we got the feedback that this can this can be implemented with ease and achieve these benefits for the Finastra line of business that we were doing with licensing part, that it automated the contract enforcement, wherein normally the model that we used to have, the benefit that we brought about was uh, earlier it was at the end of a given period that the consumption model of each licenses were evaluated, whereas while using a blockchain and in combination with the smart contract, that used to happen instantaneously. So what that resolved from a user experience perspective was it improved uh, the 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 way that people used to interact with the payments or with the licensing team, wherein they were very clear about what was the consumption, because it's a public ledger where they also the customer also has visibility of what he has consumed, and from the accounting perspective, it gave a clarity as to when and how things were consumed and utilized. So that ideally eased a lot of pain from the execution of the contract part with our existing customers. And this is completely based on API in the DApp or a decentralized model, which gave it the edge that we didn't have to build a entire enterprise application to manage it. Rather, the underlying blockchain had all the capabilities of maintaining and managing the licensing model. We also did another fund disbursement evaluation. This ideally was during the time of 2018 floods. We were working with Prathidhwani at that point in time. We discussed with them what could be done for fund disbursement and the CMDRF funds that came in. This idea was presented to the local governing bodies to how to collect, how to collate all the funds and give the end user uh, the right benefit, all the while maintaining the people who had given the money a clarity about how and where the money was used. So what we did here in this is an interesting case. So we use blockchain to run campaigns. The campaigns were more or less focused on what kind of charity it was, and in this particular case was the CMDRF, which is Chief Minister's Disaster Relief Fund, wherein we had focus groups because uh, it was not designated to a one particular fund. We had focus groups like say probably Wayanad. We had effect. I mean, during the Nipah time, we concentrated that onto the 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 query code. So based on that, we had focus groups, and then within focus group, we used to have a starting fund, which ideally was the kitty. So each of these focus groups or campaigns had their own kitty of amount, and then a top value. What was the ask? So based on what the user, the person, if I am donating money, I have that option to decide where should my money go. So from a contributor, I can select and then focus my uh, say the concentration of my money to a project of my choice. And we normally hear that there is a uh, there's a timeline that we keep to it. But when it comes to government funds or any other charity funds, we do not know where exactly it is used, or within that timeline, if it is not used, where does this money go back? So all those put points collated and used within a smart contract, and fund managers only get to go ahead and channelize rather than they taking the money out. This can only be channelized by the fund managers. They can find the right recipients of this particular uh, fund. Their job is to go ahead and get the money mapped to the right person, and the beneficiary, they get it as a complete lock-in. They are qualified by the fund managers, and this can only be exchequered from um, a government agency like the government treasury, or any such credible payments or a payment system where we keep a track of who's the beneficiary and the contributor, the fund manager. Everyone knows who has received the money. So that brings in complete transparency as that was expected, and that had given us a lot of accolades in getting that done. So this was two prototypes that we have used and then was successful. It was implemented, which gave a lot of say interest in moving and then using more a blockchain-based solution in the fintech field. One of the other project prototype that we have done was eKYC, or electronic KYC, know your customer, using blockchain, that was on R3 Coda, which was used for the automatic or a completely automated onboarding of a customer. With that, we get into the the last part, which ideally what is there for the future. We see that a lot of um, concerns or issues that were raised. There were a lot of regulatory issues that were talked about. There were performance issues, efficiencies that needed to improve. So all those getting addressed with the fourth generation is what we see right now. The latest updates on the generations that came in, we read it as a news from the 2017 till 18. The past 2 years, we have seen the growth of the fourth gen and the research that is going into it. The the type of lookouts that we need to have, we need to look into, is these technologies, DAG, which ideally is the directed acyclic graph, implemented to go ahead and take out the complete dependency on an entire network to give consciences. Multiversum talks about completely change of way how it can be used, and it goes to the extent of talking about uh, chain splitting, using using blockchain as a complete relational database system, a complete digital partner of records for all your data needs. Multiversum can stand in, and Zoom, for that matter, talks about mining that can work from your mobile phone. So that will be an interesting concept, because right now it is said the most expensive of devices right now that is being consumed is to get the hardware for your mining software, to run your mining. So here we are talking about getting your mining done using your mobile phones. It talks about giving blockchain as a service. So that's the kind of expansion that we're looking at, which is drastic compared to what we already have. And that being said, Ryan,
Hey, I'm back.
Any inputs that you want to give on the real-time cases that you might have come across? Any such instance where the customers were asking? So you are the face of Finastra. So your thoughts on? Yep.
Yeah, so blockchain's been an interesting one because there was a lot of hype about it a couple of years ago, and you had the whole hype around cryptocurrencies, which was really where it came into the market. And kind of what I've seen from both a bank's point of view and a fintech and where they've started to collaborate would be trade finance is a really interesting area where we're already starting to see it being used to facilitate things like letters of credit, things like that, where actually the trade finance journey without blockchain is quite a cumbersome one, and the whole transfer of funds and goods. So it's kind of moved from the cool stuff around cryptocurrency, which creates that buzz, into kind of more these use cases which maybe aren't as exciting for the general public, but for someone who works in, say, corporate banking, if you can speed up that trade finance journey, that's brilliant. And then beyond that, it's not just finance that is looking at blockchain, it's broader than that. So there's been a lot of examples of looking at how does blockchain apply to supply chain as well in terms of the transfer of goods, and that kind of links to sustainability, and I'll bring it back to finance because I've seen a lot of use cases coming up more and more when we're talking about sustainable finance. So the whole idea of, if you're an institution which wants to lend out money to support sustainable green finance, how do you actually track that that money is going towards what it says it's going towards? So there's lots of examples now coming up around how do you use blockchain to track transfers of money to make sure that if you say that you're using this money to go in, I don't know, fund water in a third world country, then it actually is going towards that. And just maybe my last point of how, I guess, financial institutions and fintechs are actually bringing this about. I've not seen many banks do it on their own. I think if you're a big bank, there's lots of compliance to go through, risk management, etc. And I think the way forward is actually working with a fintech. And I've seen some of them where, a bank has an accelerator program. They brought in some fintechs who specialize in blockchain, and then to bring it out to the market, they've then done a proof of concept together. If you get a fintech who can implement blockchain with a big bank, then that kind of moves everything forward. So summing up what I've just said, there is a little bit of a rant. I think it's still there, blockchain, but I think it's just not as seen as much in the public eye as much, because the use cases now are less kind of cryptocurrency and more maybe more process driven, more the back end, which are the real pain points from a day to day.
Sure. So one interesting case was like when you said tracking of the commodities. We had a Kerala government driven initiative where the coffee beans are tracked from the origin, and it is tracked till the end user. So what they were doing was when a seed is planted, that is an entry into the blockchain. So when that matures, gets cut and then transferred to the factory, that again gets tracked. So till each stage, all the processing stage gets tracked into the blockchain, and then when you have that visibility, there is nothing else that is required to drive the authenticity. So that much visibility you get to know, and the benefit that gives to the people who are using, or people in the system, they get to know where exactly you can concentrate, where your market lies. So that ideally is a way. If you see the way that you with AI plus blockchain is another field of interest, because all your data gets tracked, and then each stage is say tracked in your open ledger. So what we have seen is any tracking and taking out a pattern that becomes easy. We have talked about social banking. That was one of another project that we were discussing about, wherein all these data that happens in your normal blockchain or the system of blockchains that you might have. So once that data is collated, and then you do an AI or an ML layer on top of it, that gives you interesting patterns of usage, which ideally in all other cases is probably in a complete set of disconnected systems. So here you have a central system or a decentralized central ledger, because everyone has a copy of the same thing. So this ideally has driven a lot of thoughts into integrating AI ML into the blockchain space. So I think we are almost near to that 1 hour time on our what we have as a perspective and what the future is. I think we will open it up for question answer, if that's okay.
Yeah, so to ask a
Can
question, again, use the YouTube comment section. There's a slight delay with them coming through our end, but we'll monitor it, and it should come in. Just to get us going, actually, you mentioned around AI, machine learning, and everything to do with data. What have you been seeing from your end on that topic? Is there any projects that you've been working on looking at how you use AI and ML?
definitely. So AI and ML, we did one project wherein we were streaming the data of. I'll just give a background of that particular application as well. Um, we did a project known as Buddy Bank, where we implemented the concept of social banking. A social banking is where you can go ahead, use your community, your society to act as your bank. An interesting concept. uh, you don't necessarily need to go to a bank or to ATM to get money. So we are the Fusion Fabric APIs are the ones that actually happened or acted in the background. So in that case, what we did was all the data that is getting in as a part of these transactions, we wrote it into an Ethereum blockchain. So all your data for your transactions are also getting mapped into the blockchain along with a meta tag of probably the location or their age group. So what data that we collated, if you run an algorithm on top of the data that we got, all this transaction data that we did, it gives you a pattern or an insight as to what are the kind of transaction happening for a particular age group. So we were able to focus on, say, probably giving to them a suggestion that if you are looking for such and such services, this is what it is easily available. So the buddy bank concept has a concept of buddy stores. The intent is to power your local community and gain the trust of banks on the system or the community, not banking, not just a position as a uh, uh, say a system that only takes benefit out of its users. Rather, it was giving back to the society, as in fueling the local economy. So what we did was, based on these user behaviors, we were giving reward points or promotions from the local community, which ideally fueled their interaction with a prospect customer within their area. So, for instance, we collected details of users, and then it was related to a promotion given by a local coffee shop or a florist. So what they did was, when it was their birthday, as simple as that, they were given alerts. Yeah, you can go ahead, use this service at our shop today. So that kind of a interconnecting use case, which ideally we got a lot of interest in that kind of a algorithm, which worked in favor of the AI plus blockchain thought process.
A question that's come through: How can we leverage this to empower farmers or unorganized segments at microfinancing level?
Great. So um, I think the farmers part we did mention. The farmers, they get a track with the coffee example that we mentioned, that gets a end-to-end visibility where your goods go and how the channel works and then reaches. The second part of the question, how does this help in getting the microfinance run? Um, we talked about in one of our earlier projects, we did a eKYC. Now, what is the major challenge of um, your the conventional loan generation or conventional um, process where you need to avail a loan? People are skeptical about getting you know you as a person. So what the eKYC on blockchain it does is say what we can relate to in Indian context is the CIBIL score. Each time you check your score goes down, and then you ultimately end up a case where you are not valid as uh, a person who can avail a loan. Now, coming to eKYC on blockchain, we do a KYC or a CIBIL score once, and it is permanently retained in the blockchain, which is an immutable record. It gets stored onto the wallet of the person. So what it does is, whenever you need a loan, you can avail this uh, consent, as in you can get the consent of the person, share your details on an encrypted key to the person who is willing to give you a loan. So they get to know your credit, which is encrypted and stored, and can be only decrypted by the public key, which ideally is the way you transact or do transactions in a blockchain. So the fact that I'm trying to drive is your score, your uh, KYC done. Once it is done, it is staying forever until that validity period. So once your KYC is done and the system knows who you are, it will be easy for someone to go ahead and give you a loan, which can again be driven by the blockchain, which is a transaction from one node, the willing person, to the person who is asking for a loan. So KYC plus a micro loan with a smart contract, you can as well limit the amount that you can be transferring as a micro loan. So you cannot send unlimited amount. So micro loans always works on this basis. And if interest is to be calculated, then you can have another smart contract for that. So KYC, smart contract, and the limits, you can easily get your micro loans done.
So another question, in light of COVID-19, do we foresee blockchain adoption rates going up and enabling touchless banking services? Just to kick off, actually, I think in general, what you're seeing is this large adoption of anything that's digital, anything that reduces uh, contact. So if you think about contactless payments, Apple Pay, Google Pay, all the different types of pay, anything that's digital is like the preferred thing at the moment, from at least what I'm seeing. But what's your thoughts, Binish?
Uh, Definitely, well, that's the way. Now, I didn't imagine about doing a meetup on YouTube. I'm a people person. So here we are. The way uh, that things are converging, I think it's actually late, but it's better than never. So this is the right time, and this is the juncture that we need to go ahead and think about and adopt a technology. When there are different ways of adopting your digital technology, but I always stand in and weigh in for blockchain to be adopted, provided we have the right knowledge and the right tools to use in place. Otherwise it will fail, and then the blame would be on blockchain as technology. So uh, very clearly, once we evaluate the DLT, distributed ledger technology, which is the base of your blockchains, if you have the right use case and the right framework selected, there is no stopping. Definitely in this post COVID era, the new normal, blockchain will have a huge say.
Um, just the last couple questions before we wrap up. For anyone who is interested in finding out more, and still finds it kind of complicated to understand, are there any resources that you recommend if you want to find out more, if you want to understand the ins and outs of blockchain, go to this site, go to that.
Um, to be frank, there is no one silver bullet that works. Now, let me explain it a bit elaborate. Earlier, I used to say, I'm a .NET developer, I'll die as one. Right now, I am not a technology person who is stuck with anything. I am not a Java developer, I'm not a .NET developer. I know the basics. So, what I do is pick and choose my technology for the specific use case that I have. Similarly, blockchain is evolving. Uh, Earlier, till 2010 to 2013, you only had two frameworks. One was the blockchain Bitcoin, and then the Ethereum. Now we're talking about, say, probably 100 plus. Now, there is a drift onto the consensus algorithm. Even on the Ethereum blockchain, we're talking about somewhere around 1,000 ways or logics for using your consensus algorithm. Now, what works is when you get your hands dirty, and uh, best way, the way that I missed to say that as well. The best way is to follow the most active blockchain community for each framework. Hyperledger, I'm giving you an example. Only two of the Hyperledger uh, frameworks has got traction. We had a lot mentioned about R3 Coda. Now it has come down to the stage where R3 is being evaluated as a private blockchain, and the blockchain enthusiasts they say that R3 is no more a blockchain, but only a far-fetched implementation of DLT. So my point is, keep a track of the community, and whichever is the most active ones are the best ones to follow.
Cool, thank you for that. Conscious of time, just want to say a big thank you for joining us today, everyone who's watched. Hopefully you found it useful. We run Behind the Hype most weeks actually. So if you don't follow our meetup group, you can find various ones under Finastra, Fintechs and Devs. And yeah, we hope to see you again. Thank you very much, Binish, for joining.
Thank you. Thanks all for joining. Pleasure.